By the latter half of the 20th century, Santa Marina had quietly reinvented itself. The city had always understood the value of discretion, from the contraband docks of Puerto De Leons to the gentlemen's agreements of the Casanto banking houses. Monte Palma had long known how to make foreign money feel welcome and how to ask few questions about where it came from. But it was the oil crisis of the 1970s that forced the Republic's hand. As Senpal's revenues faltered and the promise of an industrial future dimmed, the government turned to a different kind of economy, one built not on what Monte Palma produced, but on what it could shelter. Favorable tax arrangements, banking secrecy laws, a strategic location at the crossroads of Caribbean and Pacific trade routes. The architecture of a financial haven was assembled quietly, almost without announcement. Foreign capital arrived, then foreign banks, then the towers. By the 1990s, Santa Marina's skyline was transforming at a pace that surprised even its architects. Glass and concrete rose above the colonial streetscape, monuments to investment, or at least to the appearance of it. Not all of those towers, observers noted, ever seemed particularly full.
Hello, and welcome back to Monte Palma. In this week's episode, I am finally going to be building out the downtown core, but there's one thing we need to take care of first. This intersection right down here is going to become a major bottleneck in the future. I need to fix this. The issue is this bridge connection. This is the only access point to the far side over here. That's the only road access. And what's going to happen is all the traffic is going to try to use this road to try to cut across over to the highway. So I'm going to fix this by creating an elevated road section right on top of the existing road. This will allow for the traffic that's cutting directly across from the highway to the far side to bypass downtown completely. Road infrastructure isn't really one of my strong suits. So I'm just going to show you the highlights of what I built here. I'm not going to show you the hours of struggle that I went through to try to get this to work correctly. It's mostly about lining the roads up, using Move It a lot to get everything to look smooth and natural rather than janky. Like this section I'm drawing in here, this took quite a long time to get this to work correctly. Just some off ramps down to allow the traffic to get into downtown if that's where it's going, but also allow it to drive straight on through if it's just going directly to the highway. You can see some of the issues I was having there with the road trying to connect up in ways I didn't want it to. So it took having to redraw it a few times here to get it to look right and to flow correctly. Also, the pillars underneath and all that needed to be adjusted. Using Move It to smooth out some of the transitions here, make it look a little more natural. I'm also using the traffic mod here to make sure the connections, I don't want the traffic crisscrossing or like different lanes right here that just cause a backup. So I'm just gonna make sure the traffic just stays in the correct lanes. And I have to do the same thing on the far side here where the elevated road merges back down to the ground level road. I created a custom road here with some meridians in the center. This helped to made it a little smoother transition to connect the on and off ramps. I also had to make a few alterations to the landscaping down here to accommodate the new road layout. So just removing some trees, some of the decals here. The lower section was a little trickier to get in correctly, so it took a few attempts here, but I basically had to remove the standard two-way road and replace it with single lane roads instead. Okay, now that we have the road figured out, let's move on to downtown. This area is going to require a little bit of terraforming here. First thing I'm going to be doing here is just laying out a number of buildings, trying to determine which ones I want to use for my Skyline. I'm going to be using a lot of player-made mods and custom assets here, rather than trying to remember them all on the fly here and call them out. I'm just going to add a little info panel there, just highlighting which ones I'm using. If you're interested in any of them, just stop the video and copy down the information from there. What I'm doing is looking for interesting buildings to build the Skyline. I'm also checking them for height. I don't want buildings that are too big or too tall, like the one here. This one I'm not going to keep. It's really too large for what I'm building here. I also don't want too many buildings of the exact same height. That will just create a very dull and uninteresting looking skyline. I especially don't want buildings of the exact same height right next to each other. Looking for buildings that can represent convention centers and luxury hotels. So some of these are really useful for that. Ones like this one down here, I like the shape, but I don't like the black. And when I tried to recolor it, it didn't really look right. So I just removed it. And I thought it would be fun to cobble together some static assets to create my own custom buildings. This is an expansion to one of the train stations. I'm going to use it to create a kind of a big blocky, almost brutalist style architecture building here. I'm imagining this was probably built like in the 1950s or maybe the 1960s. And this is the point where I start deleting out the buildings I don't want on my skyline. Most of what's being built down here is tied up in money laundering in some way or another. Even though the game mechanics, these are obviously functioning buildings, but for the historical story I'm telling, a lot of these buildings are empty. If you went and looked at the paper trail for who owns what, it shouldn't be very surprising that most of the people or companies don't actually exist. I briefly thought about adding a football stadium down here, but that felt a little too North American, so I decided not to do that. I'm also going to repurpose static assets here to use the medical university as a convention center. I'm going to be building the seawall in the same way I did it on the other side of the bridge. I'm using a leisure pier here rather than a quay wall. I just like the look of this a little better. It looks a little nicer, a little neater, a little tidier. The one issue with doing this though, it does have some issues connecting up to existing roads and infrastructure like you can see down here. It's a little glitchy. It'll take a few attempts here to get that to look correct. I realize here that this building doesn't make any sense. No architect on the planet is going to build a building like this with a solid brick or concrete wall facing the ocean. I have to come up with a better solution than this, so I'm going to use another static asset. This is the Halo Tower from the vanilla game, and I'm going to splice this into the backside. One thing I'm constantly doing in the background here is I'm comparing the new skyline I'm building and just making sure it blends in properly with what's already been built here. And I really am enjoying this particular view. I think this is the shot of the city right now. It looks just spectacular from this angle. one major challenge for this build was the uneven terrain. We're not talking about huge changes in elevation, but anywhere from like 3 to 9 feet, maybe 12 feet. It's really annoying that the game can't handle these small changes in elevation at all, really. It always looks a bit janky. I spend a lot of time adjusting the heights and trying to figure out ways to disguise transitions where I just can't figure out a way to fix it. Another issue I keep coming up against is the buildings needing road connections. Right down here, this promenade building, I couldn't use the actual functioning building. I had to use a static asset simply because the building was just slightly too far away from the road, which was super annoying. I'd rather have used a functional building there, and I don't see any reason why I couldn't have. Even with the highway bypass through the center of town, I'm still having a few minor choke points in traffic right down here on the far side of the bridge. The solution here was to convert one road into a one-way, come in, remove some of the crosswalks, some of the streetlights in here. And once I do that, that pretty much solves the traffic issues. I still have rush hour traffic, which I'm totally fine with. It's very realistic. I actually enjoy seeing it, but I just don't want traffic backed up to like 3 in the morning or anything like that. So yeah, this is the intersection here that was causing the most problems. Once I removed it, most of the issues went away. On the other side of our highway bypass, sandwiched between the highway and the port, I'm going to transition to mostly residential towers. This would be a very noisy area to live, but being adjacent directly to downtown makes it very convenient. Also, once again, it's uncertain exactly how many people actually live here. I would imagine most of these are investment properties, investment being in quotation marks in this case. I'm also having traffic back up at the other end of our highway bypass here. The solution was a little more straightforward. It just required adding an extra turning lane here, and that pretty much gets rid of most of the traffic. Once again, I have rush hour traffic. It gets backed up pretty badly, but I would expect that at rush hour. This is a very useful mod that you can find on the mod store. It's by Source Design. It is essentially a terrain flattening surface. They come in different sizes like 2x2, 3x3, 4x4, etc. And it does exactly what it says. It just flattens out the terrain as if a building was sitting there. This mod's been available as a local install for some time. It's only just recently it showed up in the mod store. I have this awkward transition zone between the residential towers and the actual port. I'm just putting in some buildings here to fill in the space. Nothing here is finalized yet, so I'll probably come back and revisit this at a later date. I'm now going to spend some time detailing the downtown core. I think most of this is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm going to shut up and get to work. I wanted to create some water features, and my first idea here was to use the pool from the Netherlands cemetery. This is, you can find it as a separate prop. Very useful, but immediately I see that it's not going to be large enough and it's a little boring. So I'm going to create my own custom reflecting pool here. I'm going to be using just a simple path to draw it out. Add a retaining wall to the inside. And just fill it in with a water surface. Of course, we still have homeless people in the parks. I would point out a plaza like this would not be a public space. This would be definitely a private area. So they're not going to allow homeless people. Get the terrain here to level out, so once again I'm going to be using one of the terrain leveling surfaces. I'm just going to place it down, match the height, and move it into place, and then we can see here it just flattens out all the jankiness that's happening. this little section, the terrain is pretty uneven. I couldn't really figure out a good way to... I couldn't figure out what to build in here, so I'm just going to make a little park. I'm very happy to see how busy the ferry system is. It is the main transportation system for the entire downtown region around the bay here. I think thematically it makes a lot of sense. It is crowded, it is chaotic. I wish I could just maybe detail it out a bit better to actually highlight that. Now, when I downloaded this particular building here, I didn't realize this is actually a functioning broadcast tower with a range of something like 7.5 kilometers. So that literally encompasses the entire downtown area, which should stop the complaints about bad internet service all over the map, which is wonderful. I'm adjusting the placement of the building here. I want it to line up with a road. I want to create this kind of peekaboo view as you look down the road, which I think looks really, really cool. building on this side is going to be a lot less glamorous. It's mostly going to be paved surfaces and parking lots. I'm also going to be increasing the density by squeezing in a few extra buildings where I can. The last thing I wanted to create here was a marina. And I really wanted to use the new boat lane tool that everybody's using. I really wanted to include it here. But unfortunately, when I upgraded this map from the old map system to the new water system that's now being used, I somehow ended up with tidal action happening on my map. And unfortunately, the boat net lane doesn't interact with that. So as the tides come in and out, either the boats are suspended up in the air or they're submerged underwater. So it just does not look good at all. I'm really kind of unhappy about this because it really affects everything I built along the waterfront. I'm having issues all over the map. I don't know how I'm going to fix this. I don't know if it is fixable. So for the time being, I'm just going to have to create marinas the old-fashioned way here. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this episode. Once again, thank you so much to watching to the very end. I really do appreciate it. It really helps out with the algorithm for people who watch the entire video. If you would like to help out even more, clicking on the next video in this playlist or another video from my channel also sends another clear signal to the algorithm to show the video to more people. Next week, we'll be back in Redmont, and the week after that, we're back in Monte Palma, where I have a very unique build in mind, which I don't think has been ever attempted in City Skylines before. So, everybody take care, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.